Sebastian, you lied to me, Caleb. Don't come back.
I felt so happy, and now I feel sad and upset. I want to forget this happened.
Oh, yeah. We will choose to forget Caleb's entire visit on the count of 3. Ready? 1, 2...
What about Mopple? He can't forget things.
This is the story of a shepherd named George Hardy and the sheep he keeps on his farm. George lives in a caravan right there on the property. He has given every single one of his sheep a name. The most special among them is Sebastian, the biggest ram of the bunch, who has a habit of wandering off and then finding his way back. Then there's Lily, the sharpest sheep of the whole flock. George is putting all of this down in a letter. He writes that he feeds them every day, keeps them entertained, and makes sure each one gets their medicine. When evening rolls around, he reads them detective novels and mystery books. George likes to imagine the sheep are following along with the stories, though he figures there's no real chance they could understand any of it. The truth, however, is the complete opposite. These sheep understand everything. They talk among themselves about who the killer in each book might be, and every sheep has a different theory. But Lily had already worked out the killer 2 full chapters before anyone else. She really is the smartest sheep of them all. When George finishes the story the following day, she's proven right. There are also 3 energetic lambs on the farm. Most lambs are born in spring, but this farm has a winter lamb as well. This one has no name. The rest of the sheep don't consider it part of their flock, so George gives it a little extra attention. Watching this, the sheep decide that George simply isn't a sheep. He just doesn't understand the winter lamb the way they do. George lives near a town called Denbrook. That's where another shepherd, Caleb, makes his home. A butcher named Ham lives there too. An innkeeper named Beth runs the local inn. And in the church lives a reverend named Hillcoat, a man George has a complicated history with. George walks right into the middle of that church and drops a thick bundle of cash onto the donation plate. Whoever George is writing this letter to, he wants that person to come and meet his flock in person. The next day, the sheep get excited the moment they spot Caleb's truck pulling up. They like him. The twin sheep are already plotting to bash his shiny truck, but Lily puts a stop to that. They don't go bashing things without a reason. With Caleb showing up, the sheep assume the 2 flocks are about to be combined, but George shoves him right back out of the caravan. Something else is going on inside. The sheep start saying this is sad and that they need to forget it ever happened. Now any sheep here can forget whatever they choose to. All except Maple, who forgets nothing, so they tell him not to remind them about it. On the count of 3, the sheep wipe Caleb's visit from their minds entirely. Meanwhile, a journalist arrives in town to cover the local cultural festival. At the post office, Beth spots a letter George wrote addressed to someone named Rebecca Hamstead. The 2 of them start chatting, agreeing that a letter written on rose-scented paper has to be a love letter, so Beth quietly slips it out of the postwoman's bag. Right then, the journalist walks up to Beth. He takes one look at the 3 tiny tables set up for what's being called a festival and is instantly let down. He makes clear that this doesn't qualify as a festival by any stretch. He's a small-time journalist named Elliot Matthew, sent out by the Gazette. He's been hunting for a real story for a long time, but his features editors have shipped him off to this corner of nowhere. Writing about this place definitely won't earn him any promotion. Lily walks up and demands her admission fee from him. She only cares about business. Elliot leaves. That night, the weather turns to rain and thunder. The lambs are frightened. So Sir Richfield tells them that all those clouds were once sheep, and when the sheep see the ground drying out, they dance to make the grass and clover grow. Everyone here believes sheep never truly die. They just turn into clouds. No one remembers how this story started, but Maple knows none of it is true, and yet he backs the story anyway. Elsewhere, Hillcoat locks the money away in a safe. Ham sharpens his butchering knives, and Beth, reading George's letter, becomes furious. At that very moment, Elliot's car slams into a tree. He has it towed from the scene, but as he drives off, he catches a flash of light in the distance. Then comes a loud knock at George's door. The next morning, the sheep wake up and head outside, where they find George lying on the ground. Lily thinks it's some kind of game, but Mel checks George's heartbeat and realizes he's dead. Lily insists that dying isn't real, that it only happens in books. She asks if he'll turn into a cloud. Maple tells her no, that only happens to sheep. Lily rests her head gently against George's hand. The rest of the flock receives the news too. Without George, what are they going to do? Lily says they have to forget him. Despite Maple's protests, they all begin to forget on the count of 3. Just then, Sebastian appears and says he would not let them forget their shepherd so easily. They will all remember George, because a true friend should never be forgotten. George showed him justice once, and he deserves it in return. Sebastian tells them George raised them all for their wool, and the sheep here don't even know why a sheep would be raised for anything beyond that. Right then, a lamb steps forward with a question. Why was George murdered? In the nighttime stories, the dead are always murdered. The question lights a spark in Lily's mind as well. Soon the police arrive. It was Caleb who found the body first. The butcher Ham shows up too and starts counting George's sheep. Lily is puzzled. Why would George have walked out into the rain without his hat and raincoat? Then she spots 2 glasses of drinks inside the caravan, which means someone else had been there with him. The reporter Elliot arrives as well. He snaps photos of George, but Officer Tim tells him it was a heart attack, which doesn't make much of a story. Tim had already checked underneath and around the caravan, but after Elliot points it out, he looks inside too. Tim has never faced a case like this in his life. It's Elliot who raises the question of why George would have walked outside during a heart attack. He's also noticed the 2 glasses of drinks, but Tim keeps insisting on the heart attack. He declares firmly that George Hardy was not murdered. Lily, however, says otherwise. It's a murder. George was visited by someone he knew, someone who offered him a drink. The absence of any visible injury on George points to poison, and the grassy green stain on his hand points to a struggle. She says that just like in the nighttime stories, the policeman on this case is completely hopeless, so they'll have to solve the murder themselves. Hearing that, Sebastian starts laughing. He says they're sheep. They're not clever enough for something like this. He tells Lily that she may be the smartest sheep in the world, but where in the world has she actually been? She's never left this farm, so she should leave the murder case to the humans. But Lily puts everyone to work hunting for clues anyway. She asks if anyone saw someone at the farm. The winter lamb says it saw George's ghost. Because of the dark, it couldn't see clearly, but the figure smelled just like George. Right then, the church bells ring. The bells are calling for a town gathering. It's about George, so the sheep should go too. But Sebastian points out that their hooves have never touched anything but grass. They've never left this place. And that's exactly what happens. The moment Lily and Maple see the road, they freeze in fear. They can't even work up the courage to step onto it. Lily actually lies down flat, but then she watches a chicken cross the road without a care in the world. So Lily and Maple press up against each other and cross together. Lily was confident about solving the case. The way she saw it, this would play out just like the nighttime stories. They reach the town. There, Officer Tim says he is not allowed to comment on the poisoning. And the moment everyone hears that, they understand that George was murdered. He was poisoned by something called taxine, found in the berries of the yew tree, which grows right there, near the church. Just then, a car pulls up and out steps a beautiful young woman. Tim is smitten the second he lays eyes on her. But right after, George's lawyer Lydia arrives too. The young woman is George's daughter, Rebecca Hampstead. Tim had called the number found at the bottom of George's will to bring Lydia here, though Tim had never actually read the will himself. Lydia says she'll do a reading of the will later that afternoon, and she just needs to confirm that Reverend Hillcoat, Ham, Rebecca, and Tim are all present, as each of them is named in it. Lydia also notes that Rebecca lives in America, and yet here she is in Denbrook on the very day her father died, meaning she was already in the country the night George was killed. Lydia takes one look at Tim's demeanor and realizes this is his very first murder case. The sheep make it to the will reading too. Inside the room, Tim asks Rebecca whether she could have arrived only that day or whether she was already in the country the previous night when George was murdered. Rebecca says she arrived at 7 in the evening but had never come to Denbrook before today. The sheep notice there's a smile on Rebecca's face but fear behind her eyes. Rebecca starts to cry, saying she was supposed to meet him today. That today was the day they'd finally been going to see each other. Meanwhile, Maple's gaze lands on a carrot visible through another window, and he gets himself stuck trying to reach through and eat it. Inside, Rebecca reveals she also has a twin brother she has never met who lives in South Africa. Right then, Lydia comes over and throws Elliot out, telling him he has no business being there and to leave at once. On a drying pillowcase at the inn, there is a green stain. Lydia has also called George's son Peter to join the reading. She explains that George sent her a copy of his will 2 months ago, but today she'll be reading a new one, the one Tim found on his table dated just 3 days before his death. In it, George says he has unfinished business with every person in that room. Among those now present are a fool, a bad shepherd, a spring lamb, a winter lamb, a victim, and 2 murderers. The moment they hear this, everyone starts arguing about who the murderers could be and who the next victim might turn out to be. George then leaves his son Peter 300 acres, the land currently leased out to Caleb. For Rebecca, he leaves the adjoining 300 acres that make up George's own farm, along with his caravan, his barn, and his sheep. In the previous will, Hardy had donated his remaining assets to an animal charity, but in this new will, he leaves the rest to Rebecca as well, 3 bags of fertilizer and $30 million. 2 years earlier, George had created a remedy for a sheep disease known as orth, and he sold the patent to a large agricultural corporation for that $30 million. Right then, Maple, freeing himself from where he'd been stuck, knocks down an entire pile of things. Tim steps outside to see where the noise is coming from. With his vision blocked, Maple rams straight into him and burst into the inn, smashing into everything and creating total chaos. In the middle of it all, Tim spots George's letter in Beth's possession. Maple crashes into a window. They feed him something and push him back outside. Caleb, watching all of this, says those sheep desperately need a shepherd, especially that big wild ram George brought back from the carnival. After the commotion settles, Elliot asks Tim if he'd like to make a statement, but Tim doesn't want to say anything. So Elliot lays out a proposition. He needs a story, Tim needs an arrest, so why not work together? The night of the murder, while his car was being towed, Elliot spotted a flashlight around 9 in the evening near George's field. The coroner had placed the time of death between 8 and 11. The two of them agree to work together. The sheep ask Lily why she hasn't solved it yet. She always figures it out right away in the nighttime stories. Lily says the real world is different from books. Right then, their attention falls on Rebecca, who's out in the dark, searching for something with a flashlight. The winter lamb wanders over to her. The sheep watch and notice that she smells like George, but doesn't look like him. She must have been born in winter too, which is why George didn't want her around. The less thoughtful sheep immediately start calling Rebecca the murderer. Now, the last book George read to them had explained how to narrow down a suspect. So someone has to go into the trailer and retrieve it so it can be left for Officer Tim. The one who goes in is Wool Eyes, whose fleece hangs permanently over his face, making it impossible for him to see anything at all. He bumps into everything inside the trailer before finally reaching the book. They leave it outside the police station for Tim to find and use to crack the case. Afterward, Lily goes to Sebastian and asks what a carnival is. Sebastian tells her it's music and rides. Every day, children would come to pet him and feed him, until he grew too big. After that, at night, the carnival men would lead him into a circle where he was made to fight a dog until he bled. But one night, George found him, paid them, and took him away. Lily asks how he ended up in that terrible place to begin with, why he wasn't with his own flock. Sebastian tells her it's because he's a winter lamb too, and sooner or later, a winter lamb wants to leave. The next day, Tim notices the sheep standing outside his window again. He says that every time something interesting happens with this case, there they are. Elliot thinks he's losing his mind. Then Tim shows what he's worked out. He's made a chart. Using it, he can figure out which of the 5 suspects had the means, the motive, and the opportunity. The means, the yew tree, grows all around the church. But the clearest motive, the money, belongs to Rebecca alone. Now he has to find the person who had all 3. And that person will be the real killer. Tim learned all of this from reading the book the sheep left him. He begins questioning everyone. Ham's view is that the murderer has to be whoever was in George's will, and he points out that George himself was a vegetarian. Tim asks Beth about the letter, but Beth claims it was the Postal Service's mistake. Then Tim asks Caleb why he went to George's farm that morning. Caleb says George had canceled his lease, so he was coming with a proposal to reconsider. He also tells Tim to think about the will. According to it, he's described as the bad shepherd. After that, Tim asks Hillcoat about George's donation. Hillcoat explains that George came to him a while back and told him about the church having put his children up for adoption. As soon as George got back on his feet, he'd started searching for them, but the church wouldn't share any information due to strict policy. So Hillcoat asked for money in exchange for passing along what he knew because the church was in desperate need of repair. Hillcoat insists that Caleb is the bad shepherd, not him. Tim asks Rebecca where she was between 8 and 11 on the night of the murder. She says she was at a hotel near the airport watching television. Then Tim calls her by a different name, her real name, Chastity Cramps. Rebecca had changed her name. Running a background check, Tim found that she was once associated with a known criminal and had even shared a bank account with him. Rebecca says that was 3 years ago, and she had no idea he was a criminal. Tim asks whether she's ever been near the yew tree. Rebecca says clearly that she hasn't. Tim asks about George's farm. Rebecca denies that too. Meanwhile, Lily is deep in thought. The other sheep tell her to stop thinking so hard. Rebecca did it. But then the winter lamb comes over and says quietly that no, Rebecca is good. She smells just like George. Lily takes note of this. The sheep named Cloud had said something similar the day before after spotting Rebecca far out in the field. But if Rebecca had only just arrived, how could Cloud have smelled her from that distance? Unless Rebecca had been there before? Cloud clearly isn't telling them everything. So Cloud reveals what she'd been keeping back. Rebecca's bangle. The one Cloud loved so much because it has no end. Rebecca had been at the farm on the night of the murder, and when she reached down to stroke Cloud's wool, the bangle slipped off her wrist. So Lily accepts it. Rebecca did it. She lied to the police and said she'd never been to the farm, but she was there the previous day and on the night of the murder as well. Sebastian says they've all hated her from the start simply because she happened to be born in winter. He was certain she didn't do it. He looked into her eyes. Sebastian gets angry and walks off, so Lily takes the bangle to Tim. Maple grabs Tim's cap and runs off with it. Tim chases after them and runs straight to the bangle lying out on the farm. He takes it to Rebecca, pointing out that it matches the one on her other wrist and that he found it in George's meadow, the very place she claimed she had never been. He had a warrant to search Rebecca's room, and there, tucked beneath a pair of shoes, he finds berries from the yew tree. Tim arrests Rebecca and takes her to the station for questioning. Rebecca says she's ready to tell him everything. She admits she was on George's property the day he was murdered. George had sent her a letter saying he'd been searching for her for the past 20 years. He'd also sent her a copy of the will, but it was the version without the money. George wanted Rebecca to come and meet him, so she did. The two of them talked about the sheep, and he told her how he'd named every single one of them and that he wanted her there to take care of them after he was gone. But afterward, Rebecca had been forced to lie out of desperation, because telling the truth meant walking straight into a trap that had been set for her. Tim doesn't believe a word of it. The next morning, Rebecca will be taken to the county court and formally charged with murder. After that, Lydia comes to Tim and tells him that George appears to have chosen the wrong lamb. Peter has agreed to sell his sheep and land to Caleb, and since everything of Lily's will now become Peter's too, they'll handle the paperwork the following day. Lily overhears all of this. She goes quiet and watches Rebecca. A doubt begins to creep into her mind. Then Mel points out that Caleb's meadow is right on the other side of the fence and suggests they go over and meet the new flock. But when they get there, Caleb's sheep appear. Their faces so dark you can barely make them out. They were French sheep. Lily says that Caleb will be their new shepherd. Then one of those sheep steps forward and says a single word, run. The barking of Caleb's dogs rings out and Caleb's sheep vanish. So instead of heading back, Lily and Maple wander by mistake deeper into Caleb's barn. Inside are large cardboard boxes labeled Denbrook Meats. Caleb and Ham have gone into the meat business together. Right then, the dogs show up. Mel and Lily run for their lives. The dogs chase them down. And just then, Sebastian arrives to save them. He fights the dogs off and they flee. But in the fight, Sebastian is badly injured. He can't get up. Lily doesn't understand what she's seeing. Mel says he's dying. And watching all of this, Lily realizes that the story about turning into a cloud is a lie. In his final moments, the dying Sebastian catches a vision of George. Then, spotting Caleb approaching, Maple gets Lily out of there. The two of them wake the others and urge them to follow, to come now. But when the sheep see the road, they stop dead. Lily tells them Sebastian is dead. If they don't leave tonight, they'll all die too. Caleb turns sheep into food. The rest of the flock tells her to stop saying such awful things, and they choose to forget what Lily said. Despite her protests, they forget all of it and head back into the meadow. So Lily asks Maple, tonight wasn't the first time she saw a sheep die, was it? Maple says that yes, he remembers all the bad things, but he remembers the good things too, like his mother's face and all his old friends. And she will remember Sebastian. He knows it hurts, but if she forgets, she can't save the others. It's their memory that keeps the ones they love alive. Lily was just about to go to the caravan and forget everything when she sees George sitting right there in front of her. She asks if he's really here, and he says yes, he is, because she didn't forget him. He tells her that Caleb isn't going to do anything to his flock, because she's going to save them. If she can figure out who really killed him, Rebecca will receive the flock and they'll all be safe. But Lily wonders how she's supposed to figure that out, and right then she thinks back to the grassy green stain on Hardy's hand. Everything becomes clear. Lily now knows who did it. She knows that wasn't a grass stain at all. Right then, the winter lamb comes to help, the one who had never forgotten anything. Lily has it dip one leg into yellow paint first, then the other into blue. After that, the winter lamb goes to the police station. Rebecca watches all of this. The winter lamb draws some lines. Lily is guiding it. The next morning, Tim comes out and sees what's been drawn. Rebecca tells him a lamb did it, taking orders from another sheep. Tim sees that they've drawn two lines connecting to George. On one side, Rebecca, and on the other side, green formed in the middle of yellow. But Tim can't make sense of it. As he wipes it away, his own hand turns green from the yellow and blue mixing together. Shortly after, more officers arrive to take Rebecca to the county court. Tim hands her over to them. But right after signing the paperwork, his eyes land on the winter lamb. Its legs are covered in paint. And right there, it all clicks for him too. He stops Rebecca from leaving. He tells everyone she didn't do it. He finally understood it as well. Who killed George? From the moment Rebecca arrived in Denbrook, she was the prime suspect because she lied about being at George's farm. And this is exactly what the real killer had been counting on. The killer is Peter. Just as George sent a copy of his will to Rebecca, he must have sent one to her brother too, and Peter found out about the $30 million. After that, he decided to get his hands on it. But if a murder victim leaves you a fortune in his will, you become the prime suspect. However, if the money goes to your sister and she gets convicted for a crime, the money automatically passes to the next of kin. And Peter is the one who, just like Rebecca, has been living under a different name. He is Elliot Matthews, the very person the winter lamb mistook for George's ghost. Elliot had been living in the country for some time, and George had told him that Rebecca was coming to visit. That gave Elliot the perfect window of opportunity. He came to town under the cover of the festival, made a show of leaving, but a staged accident brought him back. Later that night, after Rebecca had gone, he went to George and poisoned his drink, then planted the new will. But George was stronger than expected. A struggle broke out between them before George finally died. Elliot was the one who stepped out of the will reading, claiming he had a phone call. He was the one who slipped into Rebecca's room and planted the yew-berries in her shoes. But Elliot left behind one clue on George's hand. One mark was blue, one was green. The blue came from the medicine George used to produce. The green came from blue and yellow mixing together. There was a green stain on the pillowcase at the inn where Elliot slept the night he murdered George. The yellow came from Elliot's hair, which George grabbed during their struggle, and the cheap, quick dye rubbed off onto his hand. Elliot had hurriedly dyed his hair on the way there so he wouldn't look anything like Rebecca and George. Elliot denies all of it, so Tim takes one of his hairs. Elliot says fine. He admits he's not a natural blonde, but insists that doesn't prove anything. But Tim hadn't taken the hair to check whether it was blonde. He took it to run a DNA test and confirm that Elliot really was Hardy's son. Once that was proven, everything else would follow. So Elliot runs, and right then, the two rams who love nothing more than bashing things come charging out. Lily tells them to go bash him. They do exactly that, bringing Elliot's car to a stop. Elliot is arrested. Tim turns to Rebecca and apologizes. The winter lamb comes over to meet her too. Tim gives Lily a grateful glance as well. After that, they all head off, but the winter lamb stays behind. Then Beth hands Rebecca the letter George had written, the one she'd kept back after thinking it was a love letter. Beth had loved George, but after Rebecca's mother, George was never able to love anyone else. Rebecca says she doesn't even know her mother's name, so Beth tells her her name was Lily. Then Ham and Caleb come forward and offer to buy Rebecca's sheep and the farm, but Rebecca refuses because those two were murderers of sheep, and they didn't even know the names of George's animals. The names Rebecca knew, every single one of them. Rebecca decides to change her own name too, from Rebecca Hampstead to Rebecca Hardy. She buys all of Caleb's sheep and arrives at George's farm. She goes and meets Lily, who was named after her mother. In George's place, Rebecca gathers them all together and reads them stories. Then Lily gets up and goes to the winter lamb. She gives the winter lamb a name, George. She takes it with her, and the rest of the flock accepts it too. And with that, this story comes to its end right here. How did you like this explanation? Be sure to let us know in the comments.